And that is public domain intro music that you are hopefully hearing. If you're not hearing it, I just did a quick break there so we could cut that part off. Welcome to the Overdog Podcast. Hopefully the first episode that we will actually release. We are a few weeks late. We have been trying to record and get this off the ground for a couple of months. It is tough to get in this studio, but we hope to get this out to you before Georgia kicks off with South Carolina on Saturday. They have already played at UT Martin and Ball State. They won both games convincingly, as you would expect. There have been some areas that you look at if you're not familiar with this team or how they operate, or even if you are, maybe you have some questions. I have a couple of questions myself. I do want to focus on the good. How about Mehki Mews? We've been talking about him, not on this show because this is the first episode, but he has been talked about a lot over the last 2 weeks. The walk-on from Grayson High School, he is 5'7" or 5'8". I'm not sure what he's listed at, but he's a pretty small guy. He's also a pretty dynamic guy, a playmaker who has emerged. His coaches in high school did not see him playing at the Division I FBS level. He has proved them wrong. And from what I have read and what I have seen, I want to credit Graham Coffey for this. I believe he will be the punt returner from here on out. It was supposed to be Ladd McConkey, who's missed a few weeks. We'll see if he plays this weekend. Hopefully he will get back into the game or back into the lineup, because he's an important piece and has been an important piece of the back-to-back national championship runs that Georgia has had. But Mehki Mews has looked great to start off with. The running backs have been thin. Georgia, going into the first game, had two scholarship running backs that we thought were going to be available and healthy. Turns out Kendall Milton played. He toughed through it. He's having a hamstring issue. His hamstring has unfortunately been a bit of a bugaboo for him. Say that 5 times fast. Throughout his career at Georgia, hopefully he can get that cleared up in what we believe would probably be his final season in Athens. But Andrew Paul and Roderick Robertson, to that point, had 0 career collegiate carries. Roderick Robertson straight out of high school, and Andrew Paul coming off of an ACL. He still hadn't gotten a lot of carries. Roderick Robinson, not to be confused with Branson Robinson, who is out for the season. Roderick Robinson has done pretty well. He led the team in carries against Ball State, had 36 yards and a touchdown. But how about Dylan Bell, the wide receiver, the thick-bodied wide receiver? The guy's got he's got some muscle on him. And actually looks more like a running back. And he had a run to the outside, a touchdown run of 21 yards. That was nothing if not impressive. And my mouse isn't working all of a sudden. I mean, it's the on switch. All right, there we go. We'll see if that will continue to work for us. But there were some I don't want to say low points. There were some areas of potential concern. What do we want to see against South Carolina? Well, I want to see the offensive line, specifically the left side of the offensive line, shore itself up. You got Ernest Green over there, who's a first-time starter, really is a freshman, a redshirt freshman. He was hurt last year, and I believe he was brought in as an offensive guard, and he's playing left tackle now, arguably the most important position on the offensive line. We don't have Darnell Washington on the edge anymore, so it's very important that the left tackle be able to hold his own in this offense, both in pass blocking and run blocking. Run blocking is what's been a bit of an issue on that side of the ball. The left guard spot, Xavier Truss, they've been rotating some other guys in, Jared Wilson, and they're trying to get it figured out. They have the talent to figure it out. They're somebody on this roster, I believe, can play right guard successfully, and maybe it's Xavier Truss. He was certainly very good last year on what I believe to be the best offensive line in the country in 2022. So we'll see if he can return to form. But with South Carolina coming to town, Graham has outlined on Dog Central the history between Shane Beamer and Kirby Smart. Of course, Shane Beamer used to be on staff at Georgia. Shane Beamer didn't have to go to Valdosta State to start his career like Kirby Smart did. He didn't have to build lockers. He didn't have to clean toilets. Shane Beamer's father is Frank Beamer. Frank Beamer is the legendary head coach at Virginia Tech. And so because of that, Shane has, and I don't know his exact career history, I didn't pull it up, but he hasn't had those kind of jobs. He hasn't had to go to a Division II school and scrub toilets and build lockers with his hands, which Kirby and Will Muschamp did have to do at Valdosta State. And when Shane Beamer was at Georgia, there's rumors that he wasn't making his recruiting calls. And there was also an issue with he accepted a playbook from Wake Forest from a disgruntled employee, not while he was at Georgia, but when he was at, I believe it was when he was at Virginia Tech. And so that caused some issues, obviously, when that came out. And he, I believe, was punished internally for that. But there is a history between these two coaches, and Kirby seems to like to run it up on South Carolina. I took a little bit of action on Georgia minus 27.5. I'm not a pick guy, but I saw some people who I do trust who did take some action on that, so I jumped in on it as well. Georgia is favored by almost 4 touchdowns in this game at home. And then you had Tonka Hemingway, defensive player for South Carolina. Great name, by the way. If that's not on an all SEC name list, it should be. But Tonka Hemingway was asked at SEC Media Days what were the most intimidating or loudest environments that he's played in. And poor Tonka, he just answered the question. He just listed the places where he's played that have been loud. I think he said Texas A&M. I'm sure he said Tennessee as well, which is very loud. I've been there a few times. But he failed to mention Georgia. And because of that, a reporter asked Kirby about it. And Kirby said, essentially, and I'm paraphrasing here, it sounds like Tonka has challenged our fan base. Now, I don't think that's what Tonka was doing. I think he was just put on the spot and listed some programs off the top of his head that, by reputation, do have very loud stadiums. I've never been to Texas A&M, but I've been to Neyland. It is loud. There is a bowl, holds all the sound in. No, we don't need to build over the bridge in Sanford Stadium to turn it into a bowl. If you want a bowl, you can go to Neyland if you like bowls that much. Sanford Stadium's pretty loud enough when it needs to be. But I think Tonka might potentially get scapegoated on Saturday. And it's not his fault. He just answered the question. But South Carolina's offensive line, just to flip the script here to look at what we're expecting on Saturday, South Carolina's offensive line has been atrocious. The number of tackles for loss, I believe they gave up 9 tackles for loss against Furman, and close to double that in the opener against UNC, who has a pretty good offensive or defensive front, but nothing compared to Georgia's defensive front if you're just looking at the star talent. And I do believe that South Carolina's offensive line is going to have real trouble protecting Spencer Rattler. Now, Georgia's defensive front only has 1 sack so far this year. I do expect the fire hose to be opened up, and I don't think you'll see the same Georgia defense that you have seen the last couple of Saturdays. Not that they've been bad. There have been some busts in coverage across the middle. I don't think I'm the only one that's noticed that. And I don't even want to call anyone's name. There's someone who I think is probably at fault. I will say his name. Xavier Sori's been in there. He is the highest ranked recruit on the defensive side of the ball that was signed to Georgia in the 2021 class, I believe. He's had trouble getting on the field, trouble learning the defense, and it seems like there have been some busts across the middle. Maybe it's not Sori, but he always seems to be in there. And then he comes into the screen late to chase the guy down. Whether it's an open tight end or a receiver, most of the time it's a tight end. Those guys cannot get lost in coverage. So we'll see if that gets cleaned up. We'll see if they shuffle the lineup a little bit to try to make up or to get that out of the rotation. But Sorey, we heard a lot of great things from him out of camp, that he was starting to figure a lot of things out. So we'll see if he's got that figured out this week. And if not, we'll see who else plays, because they're not going to allow for busted coverages. I am going to the game Saturday. This is my first game. I don't generally go to G5 and FCS games. I boycott them because they're not entertaining to me. With the caveat that I do think that it is good this year, with Georgia breaking in a new offensive coordinator and a new quarterback in Carson Beck. Kind of a new offensive coordinator. Mike Bobo's been around. I really want to see the receivers and Beck get in sync this Saturday. It seems like they haven't been consistently in sync. There have been good plays made. There have been some head scratchers. I want to see Georgia score on the first drive. I haven't done that yet this year against vastly inferior competition. Competition that you look at Georgia and you think you should be able to go out, call the exact same play 5 times in a row, 10 times in a row, and still score on this team because your players are so much better. Well, that hasn't happened as of yet. I don't think it's a reason to hit the panic button, but I do want to see the offense take that next step. Let's settle into what we're doing here under Mike Bobo, and will Georgia be able to run the ball? Is Dillon Bell going to stay at running back? He's been splitting time at running back and receiver. At least he did last week. And we have a lot of receivers. Now, we'll see how many receivers we have that are actually trusted to play. But if Ladd comes back, I'm curious to see and would be interested to see if Dillon Bell gets more carries at the running back spot. And defensively, I think that we're probably in pretty good shape. I think South Carolina might have a few injuries on the outside. I'm not sure if Juice Wells is going to play for them, which would be a pretty big loss at receiver for South Carolina. So, interested to see who comes out of the tunnel for South Carolina. Is Juice Wells going to be dressed out? And I want to talk really quickly about the Alabama-Texas game. And I tweeted about this earlier. It just seemed like a lot of the national pundits had these Bama blinders on all offseason. I didn't think Alabama upgraded at either coordinator spot. In fact, I think it's possible that they downgraded at both offensive and defensive coordinator. Kevin Steele was at Miami last year. I don't think they had a top 30 defense, and he is at Miami now. Tommy Rees is 31 years old. He was at Notre Dame last year, did not set the world on fire with his offense as the coordinator there. And now they're both at Alabama. And not only that, Bryce Young is gone. The best quarterback in last year's draft. He's gone. And you got Jalen Milroe now, who's a great athlete, throws a really good deep ball, but he is nowhere near the quarterback that Bryce Young is. Bama has been playing a lot of close games over the last 2 years. Now you're inserting Milroe into this offense with a new coordinator who might not be as good as Bill O'Brien. In fact, he probably isn't as good as Bill O'Brien. And you're expecting him to be able to win you games. The offensive line, I actually bought the hype on the offensive line. I thought they were going to be a lot better. They looked bad at home against Texas. And it was a strange thing to see. I actually did not think that Texas was going to win that game going into it. But I'm not surprised that they did, if that makes sense. I thought at home in Tuscaloosa, I thought the offensive line would be good, which I was wrong about. And I bought into a lot of hype. And even I didn't believe that Alabama was going to be at the Alabama standard this year. But a lot of the national media did for some reason. And the reasons were Nick Saban smiled at a press conference. One of their running backs said that he had a chip on his shoulder. So I don't really know what Those aren't concrete examples of reasons that a team is going to play well. Now I think one of the linemen said, now we're really going to be mad now that we've lost to Texas. So apparently they're about to go on a run. And maybe they will. I don't think Alabama is bad, but I don't think that they are going to continue to be in position to win a championship every other year, like we've gotten used to over the last 15 years. It was always going to end. I think the time is perhaps now. Doesn't mean Nick Saban needs to retire. Doesn't mean that Alabama's bad. And maybe they do go on a run and win a championship this year. Maybe they get another quarterback in there next year, and they're right back to in the playoff and winning championships. I don't know. But nothing on that field that happened last week was surprising. I don't think it was surprising to a lot of people who were just watching football with common sense and are paying attention to personnel that Alabama lost last year. They lost 2 top 3 picks last year, one on offense, one on defense. Will Anderson also left. You didn't hear Dallas Turner's name called a lot, the guy who played opposite Will Anderson the last 2 years. You didn't hear him much in the Texas game at home. Maybe it's because Will Anderson's not drawing double teams on the other side of the line of scrimmage for him. And it was interesting to watch A.D. Mitchell, who I don't have a problem with. I think he did what he had to do, probably got a nice big bag of money, there's no problem. That's how the game's played now. He's at Texas. And he did what he has always done to Alabama in his career. And, well, he's only played him once. But he caught a touchdown pass on them in the national championship game, which ended up being the go-ahead touchdown. And then he caught another one on Saturday. And he got up, and if you pay close attention, he said, "Remember me," and he blew him a kiss. And I found myself enjoying that. In contrast, Jermaine Burton plays for Alabama, used to play for Georgia, was on that national championship team. And I don't pull for him. And I don't really know why. He didn't do anything to me personally. Maybe it's just because he went to Alabama, who we had just played and beaten in the national championship, and I didn't feel great about that. Maybe if he had gone to Texas, it wouldn't have been a big issue. I didn't blame him for leaving. I thought, hey, you got a chance to go play with Bryce Young, the number 1 overall pick, or who would eventually become the number 1 overall pick. It's hard as a receiver to tell you that you shouldn't do that. So I don't think it was a bad decision that he made. Hasn't really worked out for him thus far in his career. Jermaine Burton actually scored 3 touchdowns on Saturday. 2 of them were called back on penalties. So he had a pretty decent game because he didn't commit those penalties. But it will be interesting to see how Alabama bounces back from this. They're traveling to South Florida, which is strange. And I took a little bit of money on Alabama in the first half to be up by I think it was 20 in the first half, because I do think they're going to come out. They're going to want to make a statement. They're going to want to play hard. And South Florida is not your typical SEC caliber team. Although I'm not sure how great the SEC is this year, and I haven't dug into it yet, but I do want to see what college football nerds had to say, because generally I do think the SEC is the best conference. I'm not sure that that's the case this year, which may again play into Georgia's favor. But I am excited to go to the game on Saturday, and we do appreciate you joining us on the Overdog podcast. We hope to put more of these out at least once a week during the season. But I did want to leave you with one thing. I like Baba O'Riley. It's a good song. I respect The Who as one of the top British rock bands of the 70s. Top 4, top 5, whatever. I don't think Baba O'Riley makes sense for college football. I would much rather hear The Devil Went Down to Georgia. Some people think that's hokey. Some people think that it's stereotypical, it's goofy. You need to go to Baton Rouge and listen to them play Calling Baton Rouge by Garth Brooks in LSU Stadium. It is nuts. When that fiddle hits and those people go crazy, all those Cajuns over there, it is an experience. And I think at Georgia, there would be a similar, plus the song's about Georgia. It's a country song, which whether you like country music or not, I'm not the biggest country music fan myself. But whether you like country music or not, it fits. It fits with our culture, and I do think that it would work, even if you don't get rid of Baba O'Reilly. I think that Devil Went Down to Georgia should be incorporated. I'm not sure why it's not. But anyway, that is my 2 cents on that. A lot of people disagree. Baba O'Reilly is not even really traditional. They've been doing it over the last 15 or 20 years. They kind of crammed that down our throats. Again, good song, but I'm not sure what it has to do with football. Doesn't have anything to do with the South. It's a British rock band song. It's not even like a pump-up song. It's a good song. I don't hate it before kickoff. I just think we could do better. There are too many great artists from Georgia, which Charlie Daniels is not from Georgia, but he wrote a song about Georgia, so I'll give him credit for that. But even outside of that, there's a ton of artists from Georgia that, we have Allman Brothers, Otis Redding, that's just down in Macon, where I'm from, but then, all the hip-hop artists in Atlanta, even in Athens, you got REM, you got Widespread Panic. I think we could do a little bit better with the in-state, local music at the flagship university of the state. But I'll leave you with that for now. Thank you for joining us on the Overdog Podcast. Remember, it is not who's that coming down the track, it's what's that coming down the track. We'll see you in Athens versus the Cox. Go Dogs.